Let's bring in Texas Congressman Ronny Jackson. Keeping the focus on one Merrick Garland, Congressman, doesn't Merrick Garland have to now appoint a special counsel to look into the Biden docs exactly like he did the Trump docs?
Absolutely. We got to have one standard here. There can only be one law in this country. It can't apply differently to different groups of people based on your political affiliations. So I fully expect that they should pursue this. They should, be getting warrants right now to go to some of his other properties and look around. Maybe they need to go to Hunter Biden's home and look around and see what's going on there. I think it's a bit of a coincidence. It's probably not a coincidence that this involves Russia, Ukraine, China, areas in countries that the Hunter Biden issue is already involved. So what was going on there, and where were these documents for the last 6 years, and who had access to them? So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions here, not the least of which is why he did this, because he was the vice president, so he didn't have the authority to take this stuff for a period of time while they were trying to archive it and decide what he could keep and what he couldn't keep, like President Trump did. And he didn't have the authority to declassify this stuff like President Trump did. So this is in many ways a lot worse than what than what President Trump was accused of. Yet what I find interesting is the way the far left and the mainstream media, which are essentially the same thing, how they're trying to spin this and trying to minimize this and make it sound like this is absolutely nothing and it's apples to oranges and there's no comparison and we should just look the other way and move on.
Well, President Biden says that he had no idea that these documents were in his possession, but they are highly classified documents. So do you think that's possible? Do you think that's true, that he wouldn't know that he had these documents?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think President Biden has any idea what he did yesterday or what he had for lunch yesterday most of the time. So I think it's conceivable that he was completely clueless about what was going on. But it doesn't dismiss the fact that he's responsible for this stuff. These are his documents. These are his facilities, his offices, and it's his sloppiness and his recklessness that led us, that led someone to storing these documents there. He's responsible for it. There was nobody that was questioning whether or not President Trump was responsible for the documents that were found there. He definitely needs to answer for what's going on here. He needs to get the answers. He needs to tell us what's happening. I guarantee you people in his administration knew what was going on. There were people there that knew these documents existed. And I think that a lot of this is them trying to cover their butts right now, to be honest with you, because they realize what happened with as soon as the Mar-a-Lago fiasco happened, they realized, look, we're going to be next. We have some of those documents. So they probably were in a scramble to try to find some of this stuff and get it out there. And they're throwing the president under the bus to some extent, but I don't think they care. I think they're just trying to cover their own tracks.
Well, Republicans in the House look into China's ties to the UPenn think tank where the first batch of documents were found. Millions of dollars donated to the University of Pennsylvania within months of the center opening.
We absolutely will. It's starting to look like this center was nothing more than a money laundering facility for large amounts, millions and millions of dollars coming from overseas, mostly from China, being laundered through this facility, and then, hooking up the confidants and the close allies of the Biden administration who came there and drew these huge salaries for, doing essentially nothing, including President Biden, who we now know got over $1 million from the university for who knows what. So we need to look at what's going on there, where this money came from, and what they were doing with this money.
What's the reaction been from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle? Chairman of the Senate Intel Committee, Mark Warner, he's a Democrat, and he's demanding to know what's in these classified documents as well as the documents found at Mar-a-Lago. So now that there's been a second batch discovered, is the president finding himself with fewer and fewer allies and people who are trying to support him or at least brush aside the severity of this, the seriousness of all of this?
Well, I hope so. I think it's becoming obvious that this is going to be a big story. And I think some people are starting to reevaluate, and they're trying to say, okay, well, we said this regarding President Trump. We have to speak with one voice here and say the same thing regarding Biden. There are some people on the Hill, though, especially in the House of Representatives that I saw yesterday, that are just completely trying to spin this and minimize this. And I don't know how long they'll be able to do that, because I think this will roll into a bigger story. I think we're going to find out it's probably not just another facility. There's probably several that are going to pop up. We're going to find this stuff kind of stored all over the place. And it's been out there for 6 years. The 4 years of the Trump administration and the 2 years of the Biden administration, who's been looking at this stuff? Where has it been? Why did it take 6 years for them to find this and to turn it back over?
Meantime, your colleague, AOC, has challenged you, a doctor, About the health hazards of gas stoves. You first tweeted out you'll never give up your gas stove in response to talk about a nationwide ban. That tweet led AOC to say, quote, "Did you know that ongoing exposure to NO2 from gas stoves is linked to reduced cognitive performance?" You clap back with this picture from AOC's Instagram featuring, you guessed it, a gas stove. Dealer's choice here. You want to take the hypocrisy here, or as a real doctor, how worried are you about the gas stove warnings from Dr. AOC?
Well, look, I'm not worried at all. Zero. There's absolutely no scientific evidence out there that demonstrates that this type of cooking is any more hazardous or dangerous than any other type of cooking. This is just an effort by the left, by the Biden administration, to continue to push their Green New Deal and to continue to take control over our everyday lives. This is going to be a huge burden for lower and middle class folks. There's like 187 million people in the country that have these gas stoves in their homes. It's 40% of the population. People can't afford to go in and just tear these stoves out, convert what they have, and put a new electric stove in. It's insanely expensive for hardworking people, blue-collar folks like the people I represent in the Panhandle of Texas. They can't do this. And the Biden administration is just so out of touch with what's going on, and they need to be working on issues that are important to this country. They need to be working on our southern border and the crime and the fentanyl that's crossing the border and killing hundreds of people. They need to be working on the economy and our issues overseas. So this is just, it's a ridiculous.
To be clear, the Biden administration has said it does not support a ban on gas stoves. That's what they just came out with. But clearly, AOCMD does.
Well, that was a walk back from the White House so fast they could trip over their gas stove.
Hopefully they'll be fine. Congressman Ronny Jackson, Dr. Ronny Jackson.